Thank you for joining my free training. This is 3 little known secrets for booking soft commitments with your monthly webinars. If you're a capital raiser and you want to book soft commitments from accredited investors, but you're struggling to do it on your monthly webinars, I'm going to show you how I've helped my clients do it in the past, okay? So you're about to learn 3 little known secrets that can boost your show up rates, make your audience feel like they're missing out if they leave your presentations early, and dramatically increase your soft commitments and discovery calls. So I originally presented this talk to the GoBundance Fundraisers Micro Tribe, and now I'm sharing it with you. I don't want to waste your time, and I hate wasting time. That's why I promise that in many cases you can apply these secrets to your existing webinars and make them work. Even if you're not a copywriter, even if you're not a marketing guy, these are not necessarily cut and paste formulas, but they're totally doable, okay? And it doesn't matter if you're an investment firm, a GP, a first-time capital raiser. These methods work across the board regardless of the asset class. So let me give you an example. This is Pascal. So he's the founder of Grow Your Cashflow Capital, and he specializes in passive investments. So last year, I wrote his webinar funnel, and within a few days of launching it, he secured a 5-figure investment from one of the leads on his list, okay? Now, I'll share more about his story later. As for me, my name is Kent Seriano, and I'm the founder of Market Raise Repeat. So I'm a copywriter and marketing consultant, and in my job, I help capital raisers take leads from interested to invested. My work has produced sales for investment funds, PE firms, and wholesale real estate companies, okay? I'm also the author of the book, How to Define Your Perfect Investor Avatar, even if you've never had an investor. And this is where I reveal how capital raisers can figure out their ideal customer so they can create marketing messages that attract accredited investors to their deals. Now, before we get going, there's one fact you must understand. Your term sheet does not make the sale, okay? So when it comes to walking your audience through the term sheet in your webinar, it's not going to make the sale. So if you're just talking about your term sheet for 45 minutes, you're going to struggle. Because here's the truth, there are lots of people out there with great deals, okay? If you're in private debt, you're not the only person offering an 8% return on $50,000 over 10 years, okay? And I understand that your deal might be structured differently. Maybe it's only 3 to 5 years and it's multifamily, not private debt. Whatever the case, the details of a deal are not the thing that closes a sale, okay? I like to compare this to heart surgery. So imagine you need heart surgery, right? You're terrified of the operation, but you have a wife and kids. You have to do it. There's no other option. It's do or die. So like a smart person, you go to 2 doctors. The first doctor brings you into his office. He sits you down. He starts telling you about the exact procedure, the size of the stent, where he's going to make the incision, and he even breaks out a textbook so that you get a full picture of what he's going to do. The second doctor doesn't do any of that stuff. When you go into his office, he tells you there's a specific operation that's 95% effective for patients in your condition, and that it will even make your heart stronger than it was before. And he says he knows this because he's trained other surgeons in this exact method, and they've used it successfully on their patients. Finally, he explains that he is a specialist and he only works with people with your condition because he's 95% successful most of the time, okay? So which doctor would you choose? Would you choose the one who explained all the details, right, all the minutia? Or are you going to choose the one who presented himself as the perfect doctor to fix your heart? If you want your audience to commit to your deals, you have to position yourself as a perfect person to handle their money, okay? And if you don't, you're always going to struggle to persuade investors to get on board, right? You might have to negotiate your fees just to convince people to come in or to compete with your competitors. And it's going to take you longer to complete your raise, okay? Because ultimately, this is all about trust, right? Okay? Now, here are 3 ways that you can position your webinars so that you build trust with your audience, okay? The first is to present your deal as the solution to your investor's problem. The second is to establish yourself as an authority by teaching. This is also called nerding out, right? Okay. The third is that you gain trust by showing up as a specialist, and I also call this niching, okay? So let's get right into it. Secret number 1, present your deal as the solution to your investor's problem, okay? So By framing your fund as a solution, you'll get the attention of your ideal investor, okay? So I like to think about Peloton, the bike company. So in 2019, they went public and they had like the third worst IPO since the financial crash. Then a bad string of PR hit them. They launched a commercial where a husband bought his wife a Peloton, and the woke mob lashed out and they ripped their heads off, and they lost like 9% of market value in one day, which was almost $1 billion. Then a few TV shows, like they killed off the characters on Pelotons. They gave the guys heart attacks. It was just bad, and they were having a bad string of PR, and things were just like kind of looking pretty down. It's always been tough for them as a company, right? Then the pandemic came along, and it basically changed everything for Peloton, right? Because people were locked down, right? And, they wanted to stay in shape, but all the gyms were closed, okay? And no one was going outside because they were afraid of bumping into people on the sidewalk, at least in California where I lived at the time, right? So suddenly the entire country had this massive pain, right? They couldn't work out, but they also like started to feel isolated. Remember, people missed seeing friends, and they missed having activities to look forward to. And so in a lot of people's minds, Peloton went from this luxury workout bike to a solution for staying fit during the pandemic, okay? They solved the workout pain because it was an exercise bike, right? That's the most basic level, it's utility, okay? They also solved the community pain, right? And this is an emotional pain, right? Because people missed having friends. We were so isolated. And Peloton ran these live workouts with hundreds of people joining from across the country. So you really got a sense of community in a world that was like totally unpredictable. The third thing they solved was the status pain. It's like, okay, I can't show pictures of myself traveling or going to restaurants on Instagram anymore. But look, I have this cool Trinity workout bike, and that gives me something to brag about, okay? So it really solved a lot of pains, right? And it suddenly became the ideal solution for a lot of people's problems, okay? And, just keep in mind that this bike wasn't the only workout option, right? So, you can get a jump rope off of Amazon for $15, right? There are other workout bikes. You can do Pilates, like all kinds of stuff. It's not the only option, right? But Peloton was really the only one who successfully capitalized on this pain that we were collectively feeling as a nation and as a world, right? But how did it work out for Peloton? Let's look at the stats, okay? 66% increase in sales, 94% increase in subscribers. Sales spiked 172% year over year. Revenue, $607 million, right? Their market value hit $34 billion. And in 2021, they had their first ever $1 billion quarter. So pretty impressive. And this is just an example of what can happen when you position yourself as a solution to your investors' problems, right? Now, you might be saying, okay, that's like a bike company, right? It's low ticket. That's not an investment fund. So let's put the ball in your court. How many times have you seen funds running webinars like this? The XYZ fund offering, right? Okay. It's boring. Not only is it boring, but it doesn't tell me anything about what's inside. It doesn't give me a reason to click or sign up. So if you're running webinars like this and you're advertising webinars like this, you're not really giving people a way to come in. You got to give them a way to come in, okay? Now, in marketing, we call this wasted real estate, right? Your title is so valuable. The title to this webinar was, it teased a secret, okay? So now let's look at another example, okay? How about this? 3 alternative investments to protect your retirement savings from rising living costs, okay? Can you see how that's a solution to someone's problem, right? An investor who's 65 and, he sees the price of milk and eggs going up every month, and, he's worried that he's going to run out of money, okay? This is a solution to a problem. This is how you need to start structuring your webinars, okay? The XYZ fund offering is not, right? And it never will be. And here's something like as a marketer that I've learned that I want to share with you is that the quality of your product or service does not give you a competitive advantage, okay? A lot of people say, oh, if I make a better piece of cheese or if I build a better mousetrap, that, I'm going to win out over the competition. Well, yeah, that might have been true in like the 1950s, but it's not true today, okay? The market categories, like the product categories are flooded, right? There's lots of competition out there. You can't just build a better mousetrap and try to build a company off of that, because it's not going to work, okay? Right? So you got to position yourself as a solution. So here's how you can do it. One, find your audience's pain points, okay? So you need to understand what they're afraid of, what keeps them up at night, and like the frustrations they're facing in their daily lives, okay? Two, make them feel the pain, right? So once you know their pain, you need to exploit it, okay? So we call this twisting the knife, right? And basically, by aggravating the pain that your customer has, you're forcing them to acknowledge their issue, and that makes them want to resolve it, right? And you got to do this because, if given the choice between taking action and doing nothing, most people do nothing, right? This is how insurance is sold, right? No one buys insurance. You have to sell people insurance by giving them the picture of, what happens to their family after they pass away, okay? And the third is you have to solve the pain, right? Okay, so you really gotta walk your customers out of the valley of darkness, right? Hold their hand and kind of show them how that your investment fund, your deal, whatever it might be, will, help them resolve their deepest, most visceral fears, okay? So this is exactly what we did with Pascal's webinar, right? I mentioned him in the beginning. We targeted accredited investors who wanted peace of mind in retirement. So here's some of the language we used, right? You've struggled to generate consistent income with real estate, the stock market, bonds, and other investments, right? So if you've talked to investors, right, or you've talked to guys who are getting into alternative assets, you know this is a common problem, like, right? People are frustrated with the stock market. They have to time it, right? They don't know when to get in. They don't know when to get out. They are watching, people on CNN and these pundits, and it's very frustrating for them, okay? Leave the stress of Wall Street behind. The volatility of the stock market will never change, right? So, people get stressed out. Their money's in the stock market. It goes up, it goes down. What's the economy doing, right? These are pains, right? So when you speak to these pains, when you present your fund, your deal, whatever it may be, as a solution to this pain, you suddenly give them a way to come into you, right? And as I said, this is how we positioned Pascal's fund, and it resulted in a closed deal. Okay, so that's number one. Secret number two, establish yourself as an authority by teaching. Okay, people look to experts to tell them what to do, right? So hardly anyone knows enough about alternative investments to make a decision on their own, right? The average investor doesn't. It's easier for them to choose who than a what, right? So it's easier for them to choose a person like you than what, which might be, should I invest in single family housing, multifamily, should I invest in like a workforce housing fund? They don't know, right? You want to be the who, because they can buy into you. So as an example, let's look at someone here. This is Bill Nye, right? If you don't recognize him, he's basically a TV scientist, and millions of people across the world, they know and love him from a show in the 1990s, right? And basically, if you never watched this show, every week he performed a different set of experiments to basically make science fun for kids, okay? He's internationally recognized as a scientist, okay? He's given commencement speeches at Cornell. He's a member of the Advisory Council of the National Center for Science Education, and he's even a fellow of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry to advocate for scientific literacy, right? This guy is all about science. There's just one problem. Bill Nye isn't actually a scientist. He's a mechanical engineer, and also he got his start in television as a comedian. He has no research doctorate of any kind. He has no publication or research record, right? Scientists do research and publish it, okay? None of that stuff. But people believe he's a scientist because he taught them about science, right? He showed up and gave you lessons on your TV as a kid. So the point is that when you teach your audience something new, right, they see you as an authority, okay? Now, when this applies to your webinars, if you frame your webinar as a free training, you can gain authority status in their minds, right? And part of this is like a free training is more enticing than a webinar, right? A webinar kind of sounds like almost like a little work, right? A free training is like you're excited about learning something new, right? And so when you frame your webinar as a free training, like I said, you'll gain authority status, right? And also, so when your investors have questions about investments, they're going to look to you. They're going to start looking to you. When you send marketing emails, right, when you're working on converting them into investors, they're going to reply. They're going to write back to you. When they want inspiration or they're feeling hopeless about the economy and the stock market and everything, they'll seek you out as an authority, and they're going to like look to you for reassurance, right? And every time they do that, that trust and that bind is going to become a little bit stronger. And that's what's ultimately going to help you create a sale, right? So, I'm not going to say that it's necessarily going to happen in your first webinar, right? Someone could be on your email list for a few months. They watch your webinar, they sit through it, okay? They think on it. They start to trust you a little bit more if you get them from the beginning to the end, right? And over time, maybe you drop a second one or a third one, and it's going to help build that bond, build that trust, and eventually they're going to come through. All right. But let me give you some practical tips for making this happen. Okay. The first thing you can do is you establish your expertise by teaching something practical, right? So this could be like market knowledge. It could be investment knowledge, what's good, what's bad, right? It could also just be past trends and future forecasts. Basically anything that isn't like super readily accessible on Google and isn't common in the real world, like it isn't common knowledge, that'll be okay. Because you got to remember too that like in terms of investments, you're an expert compared to them. Another thing that you can do is give them useful resources even if they don't invest. So I would consider like this free training a useful resource. So even if you don't ever work with me, hopefully you get something from it, okay? So here's our 3 like title ideas that you could even steal these if you want. 3 tips for choosing your first alternative investment. 7 questions to ask when entering a new investment for the first time. How to choose an investment for maximum tax breaks in 2024. I bet people would watch that if you run it, right? But the point is that you're giving them knowledge that's going to help them make a decision, even if they don't end up working with you. Now, ultimately, you do want to rig this a little bit so people come back to you and they don't go to someone else, but that's another topic, right? And the last thing that you can do is you reveal a secret, right? So you can give them insider knowledge. And this is basically stuff that they're not going to be able to get anywhere else. And when you're doing this, the trick is that you don't want to give away the keys to the city, right? So you don't want to give away like the secret recipe, but you do want to give them something. This is what we did with Pascal. So we taught his audience about workforce housing, right? And we also gave them 3 tools for choosing a passive investment their first time out. It helped close a deal, okay? It was a little training, not too much, but enough to deliver value and show them that he was a bona fide expert. All right, secret number 3, use webinars to target niche audiences. Your free training will attract more investors if it's designed for one niche audience. So let me give you one more example. In 1994, there was a stockbroker who got tired of working on Wall Street, loved the city, but he hated his job, so he quit and started a business with his wife, okay? Over the next 9 years, they grew the business to 65 employees and a gross revenue of $3 million a year. In the 12 years after the recession, they doubled their gross revenue to $6 million. Now, this guy lives in New York. What do you think he sells? It's not real estate. It's not advertising. It's not water bottles in Times Square. He sells flowers, right? Okay, so this Nick Fidos and his wife gross $6 million a year selling flowers. So how can you possibly do that? You do it by niching down, right? So Nick could have done what everybody else did. And, he could have started pitching all the marketplaces. He could have had guys pushing carts down the sidewalk. He could have had guys standing in traffic, pushing roses on people who were waiting at red lights. He didn't do that. Instead, what he did was he found a niche market, right? So like I said, he'd already worked on Wall Street, okay? He knew the lingo, he knew the people, and what he discovered was that Fortune 500 companies, they needed flowers for their offices and for employees, right? But most flower people, they couldn't make a spreadsheet to save their lives, right? And these businesses wanted someone who spoke their language, right? Okay, so that's where he found his niche, and he ends up making $6 million a year selling flowers to corporations, right? I mean, these are the same flowers you pay for $12 at Trader Joe's, right? There's no difference in the flower, right? And again, this all comes down to niching. So if a stockbroker can scale a flower business to 7 figures a year by niching down, do you think you can get some investors by doing the same thing? I think you can. Niching makes it easier to market your fund. That's probably the biggest advantage you're ever going to get, right? Because you know exactly who you want to go after and you know what you need to say. Okay, that's the next big part. And the third hardest part is like you know where you need to target them. Okay, really important. Second, it eliminates the paradox of choice, right? So if you're an investor and you're trying to decide between 10 different funds, they all look the same, you don't really know which one to choose, but then a niche webinar comes across your Facebook feed, right? And it makes your decision a whole lot easier, okay? So you're making it easier for people to buy into you. The last thing it does is it uses the law of supply and demand to leverage sales, right? So if you're the only fund offering investments to like a really select group of people, you're suddenly viewed as exclusive and limited, okay? Especially if there's a cap on how much money you can accept or how many investors you can bring on board, okay? The less of you there is, the more valuable your position is, right? And what I really like about using niching, especially in webinars, is that you can try a niche, right? And see if it works without branding your whole entire, your company around it. So Dan Kennedy tells this story. He's a marketing guy. And he tells a story about how a supplement company had a vitamin that helped increase your vision, right? Okay, so for your eyes. So in one magazine for pilots, they ran it as, a supplement to help pilots see better, right? And in another magazine for kind of just regular consumers, they talked about how that they could help, people over 65 improve their eyesight and rely less on their reading glasses. Okay, so just think about that concept. It's the same deal packaged differently, right? Okay, and this is you can do this with your fund. You can do this with your deals if you're raising capital. There's lots of ways to do it. So let me give you some actual practical tips that you can use. There are a bunch of ways in this, right? So you can go by investment goal, right? So you can focus on people who want tax breaks, right? Or you can go after people who want to build equity, okay? Or you can go after people who are seeking passive income, okay? That's the first tip. Second, you can go by profession, right? So you can niche down and focus exclusively on doctors, MDs, surgeons. You can get very, very narrow with who you go after. You can go after lawyers, right? Or you can go after entrepreneurs. Third is by your customer profile, right? So you can niche by high net worth individuals with $250,000 or more of investable assets, right? Or you can go after guys with $500,000 or more of investable assets, right? You really get to decide who you go after with your deals and with your funds, okay? That's really important to keep in mind. So here's one example you might know of. It's the white coat investor, right? So this is a really great example. Their entire position is built around providing investment advice to MDs, right? So they have a lot of ways to monetize this. So they sell advertising space in their email list, right? And that's where guys like you can promote your deals, right, and your funds. They hold conferences. They built a thriving community that's really active, all by niching. Another one is Ascent Equity, and those guys basically just focus on doctors. So it's by doctors for doctors. So these are examples of people who are already using this stuff. And when I say 95% of people really aren't tapping into these things, that's not an exaggeration. I really do feel like a lot of capital raisers, a lot of fundraisers, whatever the case may be, they're not using these simple marketing techniques that could really give you some leverage, right? And really, solidify your position, right? And make your webinars more powerful simply by making a few simple tweaks. Okay, so let's review the tips real quick. So the first one is that you got to position your fund as a solution to your investor's problem, right? Show them that you can solve their problem with your deal. Okay. The second is that you got to establish yourself as an authority by teaching, right? So instead of just talking about your annualized distributions and your term sheet, teach them a little bit, educate them on the market, educate them on the opportunity, right? Okay, the third thing you do is you use webinars to target niche audiences. Okay, so if you do this, I really do believe that you can increase your soft commitments and discovery calls, even if your fund is still new. So circling back to Pascal's story, I use these exact techniques when building out his webinar funnel. Some of the stuff he already had in place because he's a very savvy marketer. But like I said, less than 1 month after coming onto his list, and very soon after we launched that webinar, he secured an investor for 5 figures, right? So I'm not going to share the number because it's private, but I can show you the email that he sent to me, and I'll just read it. He said, "Hey Kent, just wanted to share this win with you as you helped me build out my funnel. I just had this customer commit to investing in my fund, and I'm onboarding them now with all the paperwork. He's someone from my network who joined my list through our deal flow magnet, right? So a warm lead, and you might have people like this in your network. So a webinar can help you convert them, right? And he's on board now as of December, right? So, like I said, it's totally doable. If you have an email list already with people on it and you're trying to get them to, wake up, when you frame your webinars this way, you can easily do it, right? So ultimately, the webinar helped push this investor over the edge, right? And it really can do the same for you. If you want to build a database of private investors who can possibly fund your deals for years to come, right? If you do it right, you can do it with your webinars, with your now free trainings, okay? So here's how I can help you. If you want my help, and if you're interested in working together, click the button below to book a discovery call. So this is a short 15-minute discovery call. And on that call, I will tell you that if you have an existing webinar, I will explain how I can help you evaluate it to see if it needs work. And if you don't have a webinar, I'll explain how I can help you build yours like I did for Pascal, right? But please don't wait, because aside from the fact that my availability is limited, people come into my world and my time gets eaten up very quickly. I can only work with a limited number of clients. Plus, there is a limited number of accredited investors in the US, right? So if you've looked at the stats, I think it's something like 20%, but only a handful of them are investing into alternative assets like private debt and multifamily, right? So the pool is shrinking as competition is growing, right? And if you're tired of watching your competitors scoop up wins on Facebook, Instagram, wherever you're living, wherever you're seeing people, and you're ready to complete your raise, I would really recommend that you book your discovery call now. So like I said, click the button below to book your discovery call so we can talk and I can help you with your webinars, all right? And once again, just want to say thank you for watching. I hope you found this useful. I really do believe if you apply these tips that you can get something out of it. All right, cheers.